Following work as a youthful advisor for the California Division of Reformatories and Rehab for above 10 years, Dempsey transformed to Islamic once among 2011 and 2013, up initially mobile to Syria in 2013 to take part in fight, on to the paper and trial documents. His travel and next detention time trying to back to the U.S. allocate a broad band of US residents who include traverse to Iraq and Syria and effectively related in or united and violent extremists team with 2011. The cases set out in the paper involve a third of the at low 153 Americans who include been detained on ISIS-related extortion with 2011. At 43-year ancient, Dempsey is one of the senior individuals aforementioned in the paper that found the ordinary age of such Americans who traverse to Iraq or Syria to be 27. More than rather than 89% of the individuals aforementioned were men and 70% were US countrymen or constant residents. Couple travelers were given asylum seeker statute in the US up leaving, and else was student in the US by a undergraduate visa, the paper told. 16 cases, 25%, implicated an person whose residence statute could not be established. Time the extensive most of Americans who desired to accede forcible violent extremists groups overseas each dead across the sea or stay unrecorded to. The paper notes how 19% of the individuals aforementioned were, Love Dempsey, detained in the U.S. or across the sea. On to penal complaints, Dempsey conspired to journey to Syria in an person called to as Man A. Man A as well transformed to Islamic, but his way to Syria is deliberate extraordinary, on to the paper, taking into account which the authors trust to be his history associate in a independent individual team mainly geared in the direction deprecating tax laws. The authors of the paper know the person was liberated of jail in 1999 following serving 4 persons year for few counts of scam and crimes associated to an attack on a shire by the government servant. Taking into account the absence of openly accessible testimony on these cases, it is particularly difficult to define how a ex-penitentiary official and a ex-independent individual who both have transformed to Islamic met one else, and solved to journey to Syria to struggle, the paper told. Yet these cases are reminders how the public protection, how impact travelers are not ever simple or usual. The two men took really various paths, one day they arriving in Syria as Dempsey taken to back to the US following just a monthly and apart, but Man A remained in the area, potential connecting ISIS or else violent extremists team and his present location stay unidentified, on to the paper and trial documents. In spite just conducting a brief period in Syria, Dempsey was located on the FBI not-fly listing and surveyed by investigators following he taken to back to the U.S. via Rome, Italy in August 2013, the authors of the paper complained. For how at first interviewing, Dempsey declared he traversed to Syria in Man A to assist refugees and told he did not aware any members of bomber organizations, the paper and trial documents told. Dempsey cancelled his back travel to the U.S. and remaining in Rome next his original interviewing in investigators but was surveyed once again by the U.S. by the government in January 2014. At that period he acknowledged to mobile to Syria to struggle and recognized pin in few violent extremists organizations, consisting ISIS, on to the paper and the penal appeal. He as well acknowledged to charming in fight on 2 occasions, the paper told, quoting the trial documents. Dempsey fled Rome in October 2014 and was detained in the UK in January 2017 on extortion of manufacturing erroneous statements to FBI investigators. He is waiting issuance to the US, on to trial documents. Time the long of sentences for terrorism-related crimes tend to differ in the US. If condemned, Dempsey many faces a maximal of verdict of 8 years in jail or a penalty up to $250,000, trial accounting records show. On to a January 2017 trial filing by his attorney, Dempsey does not disclaim any of his rights by each the 4 correction, 5 or 6 amendments to the U.S. Basic Law and refuses to ensure any statements or allow any searches in any one of any branches of law coercion in connect in any such actions comprising interrogative, inquiry or searches. Time less in quantity rather than largest West countries, America has not been immunity to event of overseas fighters, told Vice CEO of the Program on Extremists at George Washington College Seamus Hughes, one of the authors of the paper. They go of all walks of lifetime, largest with private protection to do the travel. The training session scientific, should be as a base to know the present risk and hinder a following wavelength of recruitment, told Hughes, and specialist on terror, homebrew forcible extremist and counteraction forcible extremist. The president of the Collaborative Chiefs of Personnel, General Joseph Dunford, told in October how as lot as 40,000 overseas fighters of 120 various countries had united ISIS in Iraq and Syria. CEO Donald Trump card has frequently advertised U.S. war reached in Iraq and Syria and told ISIS is on the work as their area continues to decrease. US overseas fighters include explored some areas as capacity destinations, consisting Yemen, Libya, Somalia, and Nigeria, but such cases were not particularly turned on in Mon's paper. Sentences for terrorism cases such to Dempsey's include characteristically ranked among 10 and 15-year, but taking into account largest of such individuals were characteristically junior in year, largest will be liberated and be permitted to go on to dwell in the U.S. Down there is a actual issue of while you put who in prison, is how the top place to put them for several of these crimes and how length sentences should constitute, told David Sturman, a politics analysis at New America who focuses on homebrew extremist.